Hi, how are you? I'm glad that you have found this video and are actually watching it. If you're encountering me for the first time, my name is Ruth Waithera of the Soul Clinic. The Soul Clinic is where we fix your pain, help you feel good so that you can live a whole life. I'm a coach and I'm also a therapist, and I'm very passionate about helping people overcome the emotional and mental blocks that come in the way and hinder us from living an authentic life. My greatest desire in life is to see people be able to transcend their unfortunate life encounters and incidences so that they can live their lives authentically and live in purpose. And today I want us to talk about something that for many of us stands in the way of us living our lives the way we would want to. It stands in the way of us being authentic. It stands in the way of us bringing our A game and putting our best foot forward. And it's also a topic that a lot of people don't seem to understand. They don't seem to get a grasp. So I want to do a video about it today, and hoping that by the time you're done watching this video, you'll have a better grasp of what trauma is all about. So today I want us to talk about trauma because many people imagine that trauma is what happened. We imagine that trauma is the incident. But I want to let you know that trauma is what happens within you as a result of what happens outside or what happens without. So it's what happens within you as a result of an outward experience or something that happens to you. So it's not the event. So the event is not what is trauma. The event could be traumatic, but trauma is now what happens within you as a result of that event. And in most occasions, trauma is the response. So trauma is normally a pain response. So when something so heavy or bad, a bad experience has happened to you, what happens within you is what we define as trauma. It's normally a survival mechanism or a survival pattern, because sometimes we encounter life incidences that are very painful. They really give us a big blow, and we don't know how to adapt to them. We feel like if we allow the full measure of what is happening to hit us, then that experience can easily overwhelm us. So we have to get a survival pattern or a survival mechanism. Because what mainly happens in a traumatic experience is that we may get a nervous system overwhelmed. And when our nervous system gets overwhelmed, many of us respond to the 4 Fs, the flight, freeze, fight, and fawn responses. So these are normally defenses to your system. These are normally like defense mechanisms to make sure that the full impact of the traumatic experience doesn't hit you so hard. So remember, we have said that trauma is normally a pain and an adaptation mechanism. So you feel like, if I allow the full measure of what it is that has happened to hit me, it may overwhelm me, I may not survive. So to make sure that you're surviving, then you adapt or you go into the 4 Fs, what are called the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mechanisms. So what happens to many of us and why now trauma becomes problematic is because we don't allow ourselves to process it. So for example, we take on a lot of survival stress. So that survival stress, when it remains unprocessed, it stays in our systems. And when it is staying in the body, for example, you have a system overload of traumatic experiences, especially if you have had many traumatic experiences. So you have an overload of traumatic experiences which you did not process. Now, when you have these traumatic experiences that are unprocessed, giving you an overload in the system, you are likely going to manifest physical ailments and physical illnesses. And this is where you realize that maybe you're having high blood pressure or you're having other lifestyle diseases, because also part of how we respond to trauma is by taking up maladaptive coping patterns. For example, you realize that some of us, when we have such traumatic experiences, instead of processing the pain and allowing the pain to take its full cycle, so that it gets processed out of the system. So instead of allowing yourself to feel the pain, because you feel like if you allow the pain to come through, if you allow the pain, for you to experience the full measure of the pain, it's going to overwhelm you. You are not sure that you can survive that experience. So we get into these maladaptive patterns and behaviors where we numb the pain. And numbing the pain can be done in many ways. It can be getting into addictive behavior. For example, you find yourself abusing drugs and abusing alcohol. You get into food addiction, you get into gambling, you get into sex addiction, and other maladaptive ways of dealing with pain. So these physical and emotional overloads of stressful and traumatic situations, like I've said, can bring you physical ailments and those other maladaptive patterns, but it also predisposes you to mental conditions like depression and anxiety and such. So it's very important that you learn how to process trauma, because trauma is mainly like you have undigested life experiences. So something happened to you, you didn't digest it fully, so it didn't go through the system like it was supposed to go through. Because when you go through a traumatic experience, we normally have the physical responses to trauma. And many of us don't know how to allow that physical response and how that physical expression of trauma to come through. So it doesn't come through. You block it somewhere along the system, your body, because your body is the system, and your body will experience, the traumatic experience. Your body will experience the trauma itself. So if you don't allow your body to process the trauma, like to pass through, you process it, it passes through, it gets to the other end, it gets somewhere stuck. So you have these undigested life experiences, you have them undigested in your body, you have them undigested emotionally. Many of us are very afraid of difficult emotions. And it's very common to tell people, don't cry, oh, it's not as bad, it's what it is. But it's important to understand that after you have been through a traumatic experience, it's good and it's very helpful, and it's the only way to process trauma is to allow it to come through. So it may come through physically, it needs to come through emotionally as well. So it's good to allow yourself in a supportive, safe environment, allow yourself to process the traumatic experience. It's like you are allowing that process to complete the loop. Because if it doesn't complete the loop, if it doesn't go the full cycle like it's supposed to do, it gets stuck in your system. And when it's getting stuck in your system, it's going to create for you the physical problems that I've talked about and the emotional problems that I've talked about. So allow those processes to complete the loop. And I know that is scary, and many of us, we want to avoid it. But if you don't do that, then you remain with the negative repercussions of that traumatic event, a trauma that is stuck in your system physically and is stuck in your system emotionally. So if you feel like you can't be able to process that on your own, this is where now the support of professionals will come through. Because it's good that you are able to create a safe environment for yourself. Because the only way to resolve trauma, like I've said, is to allow it to complete the loop emotionally and physically. So I hope that by the end of you watching this video, that you now understand what trauma is. And in as much as you and I know we can't always avoid traumatic experiences, that part of your self-care, part of ensuring that you are emotionally and physically healthy after a traumatic incident is to ensure that it has completed its loop. It's to ensure that you have allowed yourself to experience the physical sensations that come with trauma, the emotional experiences that come with trauma, and you allow those experiences to finish their loop. However, also understand that this needs to be done in a safe environment, because if you try to do this by yourself, you may, cause more harm unto yourself. So if you feel like you have a traumatic experience that requires processing and you don't have the know-how of how to do that, get the help of a professional who is trained in trauma processing. Because if you don't do it, then you're likely going to attract physical and emotional problems unto yourself, and these are going to hinder how fruitful or how authentic or how well or how happily you are going to live your life. So that is trauma defined. So this is trauma episode 1. So if you find this video useful, please share it with a friend or a relative. Let's spread this word around. Let's make sure that as many people are processing their traumatic experiences, because we want to see our loved ones and the people that we care about living their best lives from here going forward. And this is Ruth Waithera of the Soul Clinic. The Soul Clinic is where we fix your pain, we help you feel good so that you can live a whole life. See you in episode